If you're a regular Geek's Guide to the Galaxy listener, please rate and review us using your favorite podcast app. And I want to give a special thank you to Rich and LGH Hubbard, who both gave us 5-star reviews on Podcast Addict. Rich says, "Great stuff, sci-fi, fantasy, and everything around and in between, with insightful commentary and interesting guests. The Kazuo Ishiguro interview was a particular high spot for me, and I really enjoy the host's dry humor." And LGH Hubbard writes, "Amazing podcast, thoughtful and insightful. Pretty much the one I've listened to the most consistently over the years." So big thanks again to Rich and to LGH Hubbard for those great reviews. All right, so now let's get to our show.
Wired.com presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And here is your host, David Barr Kirtley.
Hello, and welcome to episode 562 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Today on the show, we'll be discussing Season 1 of the Netflix series 1899, about a transatlantic steamship that experiences strange events after investigating a mysterious distress call. And this will include spoilers for all of Season 1, so just be aware of that. And I'm joined by 3 guests. So first up, we've got Erin Lindsey, making her 38th appearance on the show. She's the author of the Bloodbound series of epic fantasy novels and the Rose Gallagher series of paranormal historical mystery novels. Her latest Rose Gallagher book, The Silver Shooter, is out now. So Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
The next up, we've got Andrea Kail, making her 34th appearance on the show. She's a graduate of the Odyssey Writers' Workshop, and her short fiction appears in the Writers of the Future anthology, Fantasy Magazine, and Lightspeed. She's been a television writer, producer, and script supervisor for shows such as Late Night with Conan O'Brien, The Chew, and WWE's Monday Night Raw and Friday Night SmackDown, and she's currently a writer for Pixelberry Studios. So Andrea, welcome to the show.
Good to be back, Dave.
And also joining us today is Ruairi Carroll, who you may remember from our panel on the Netflix series Bodies back in episode 558, and from our panels on the Netflix series Dark back in episodes 294, 372, and 424. He works as a producer with Virgin Media News in Ireland. He started out as a local radio reporter in Dublin, and has spent the past 20 years as a broadcast journalist, covering everything from politics to crime. So Ruairi, welcome to the show.
Good to be here again, thanks.
Okay, so let's start off with Andrea, and have you tell us about your expectations going into 1899.
I don't know that I had any expectations other than, wow, this looks cool when I saw the trailer. And I don't think I had seen Dark yet. I think I watched Dark, which is by the same producers as 1899. And I hadn't seen Dark yet, but I'd heard a lot about it. And so I'm like, all right, yeah, I was looking for something to watch, and I watched it, and it was riveting.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine what it might have been like watching this before watching Dark. I mean, but you're a big fan of historical stuff, right? Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And, you know, I love a good haunted ship story. So this sort of gave me both of those things. Yeah.
And then turned out to be science fiction.
Yeah, they do pull a bit of a bait and switch in this show. But
that's the great thing about it.
Mm-hmm. So I guess, you know, again, this is spoilers. We're going to spoil the big twist in this show. I have a feeling pretty quickly. So definitely, if you don't want that spoiled, stop listening now. But so Erin, what were your expectations going into 1899?
Well, initially I didn't have any expectations at all because I had never heard of it. It was recommended to me by my brother-in-law, which was fascinating to me because he doesn't even watch really fiction, let alone speculative fiction. But I think he probably saw it. He really enjoyed it, and he saw it as being like straight up in my wheelhouse because it was 19th century speculative fiction, which is what I write. And so when we sort of clicked on it and brought it up, we didn't have any background information. I mentioned, I think on the show before, I prefer not to look into shows before I watch them just because I don't want to spoil anything or create any baseline expectations. So we started watching it, and immediately I was kind of getting the terror vibes, which I really liked. We really liked that show. And I also got dark vibes. I actually didn't know that it was the same producers, but I figured it out pretty quickly, certainly when the actor who plays the captain, who also plays adult Jonas, came on screen. I was like, I knew it. I knew it was the same people. So I was really excited the first couple of episodes, and really was jamming with especially two shows that I really liked, The Terror and Dark. So I had pretty high expectations going in after those first couple of episodes.
Yeah, and I guess I'll explain. You guys all watched this when it first came out, or like, did you watch it when it first came out? Okay, this came out a year ago. I guess I'll explain. So, did everyone watch it then, or more recently, or
pretty close to that? Yeah, for me.
Me too.
Yeah. How about
it was November. It was November 22. I actually, because I've got the Wikipedia open
really?
Here. Yeah, November 2022, which seems like about 4 million years ago. I have no concept of time anymore. But I watched it when it came out. I don't think I knew it was from the Dark people initially, but whatever way Netflix algorithms work, it was being pushed on my screen all the time. And I think I was seeing a lot of trailers on YouTube because I follow the Netflix channel on YouTube. So I'd seen a few trailers, and then it was a big push. And I kind of burned through it to begin with and had a great time, I got to say.
Yeah, I guess I'll explain. I just watched this for the first time this past week. I don't know. I hadn't gotten around to watching it. And then when we did our Bodies panel, Andrea said, oh, the show is so... She listed it as an example of a canceled Netflix show that was just like so good. Like, how could they have canceled that? And we'll get into that. But yeah, so I went into this, knowing it was from the showrunners of Dark, and also knowing that it had been canceled, after one season, and also having seen a lot of, people online really upset that it had been canceled. I mean, we're now more than a year, I guess, since the show came out, and I'm still just constantly seeing people grousing on social media of like, oh, how could Netflix, how could you fund this stupid show or this stupid show that comes out? Why don't you give us more $18.99? That's what we really want. So those all kind of fit into my expectations for this show. But so Andrea, do you, that's what you said, right? The last time you said, this is so good.
Yeah.
I think that's a direct quote.
Yes, direct quote. I'm still real salty about it too, because, same as everybody else. They make these great shows, and then you binge them, and then you get to the end and you're like, oh, that's been canceled. Well, great. Thanks so much. This is a thing that Netflix does, and it's not exclusive to Netflix, but Netflix really seems to do it on the regular, and it's aggravating.
Yeah, especially when you give your time. I mean, what is this? 8 episodes? Is it 8?
8 episodes.
I can't remember. That's like 8 hours of your life. And for me, because I'll do David a favor, that's 16 hours of my life. I rewatched in the last week.
Yeah.
But you give, I think you dedicate that amount of time to something, and then there is the big, twist at the end of this, which I don't want to be the one to do it. Someone's going to have to do it. But, I wanted more, and I think a lot of the decision to cancel it. I mean, it was a big hit for them. I looked up their figures. It was in the top 5 for 3 weeks, 70 million minutes, or however they measure it. But I think it could have been a cost thing. I think it cost a lot of money to do this,
which seems odd to me because it's not a lot of sets going on, and a lot of it was in front of a green screen. Frankly, a very good green screen, but it was. It's just the boat, the hallways, the deck, the office. This
was super expensive. It was the most expensive German show ever made. And it looks great. I mean, the costumes and the sets and the special effects, everything looks top notch in this. So I can believe it was expensive to produce. But I don't know. Should we talk about the cancellation first? Seems like people want to talk about that. Or, I guess the other thing I want to say about that is that it's not like, any show that you like, you might be upset that, oh, I wanted to see more of that and I didn't get more of that. But particularly with a show like this, where it ends on a massive cliffhanger with like all these mysteries unresolved, that's, even more aggravating than just any show, stopping before you wanted it to. Mm-hmm. So I think there is definitely a conversation worth having about whether, content producers have an obligation not to end shows on that sort of massive cliffhanger, if they need to plan to either just not do the show at all or commit to not ending it on a massive cliffhanger or something. Because this is a huge problem for this show in particular.
It's a huge problem, but if showrunners were somehow committed to that, and practically speaking, I don't know how that would work, it would just incentivize even less risk taking. I don't know how, Ruairi, you have some figures, I guess, of how the show performed. Netflix notoriously is pretty tight-fisted when it comes to information about how their shows have performed, what their metrics for success are. From what I've read, that period that Netflix went through of throw it at the wall and see if it's going to stick, maybe drawing to a close for a variety of reasons.
Oh, yeah.
And, there are lots of upsides for that. As the viewer, it means you're not left hanging on a cliff. But as a content creator, the downside is that further incentivizes, in an already incredibly risk-averse environment, less risk-taking and going with known IP and going with known story tropes and going with not thinking outside the box. So I, for one, would rather have a few stories end on cliffhangers. I'm just going to say it right now. If I were in charge of Netflix, I would totally have canceled that show. Because it was so expensive, and because I think there was some serious storytelling entropy going on toward the end, and I fear the center could not hold. But not to sort of jump ahead in the discussion, but yeah. So for me, I would rather they continue to take risks, even if it means sometimes we're left hanging.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I saw was that Netflix is that a lot of people, one of the things that caused them to cancel the show is that a lot of people started watching it and didn't finish the season. Like, it had a high rate of dropout. And because, as Ruairi said, because they were pushing it so hard, a lot of people were watching it because it just came up first thing on the homepage and everything. But then a lot of people watched, 1 or 2 episodes and then didn't finish the season. So that's one thing I heard. And then another thing I heard is that maybe as a result of some of the foregoing factors, that Netflix for season 2 wanted to, have a lot more active role in shepherding the production. And the showrunners, didn't want to compromise their vision and have a lot of interference from the studio. And so they kind of parted ways, I think, fairly amicably over that. I mean, these same showrunners have another deal with Netflix. So it's not like, I don't think it was a huge acrimonious thing, but I think they just, Netflix had their conditions and the showrunners had their conditions, and they just couldn't, come to a consensus on how to move forward. I don't know. Those are some things
I think that speaks to a kind of change in Netflix as well, because I seem to remember a sketch show where it was Netflix's front desk and the receptionist was answering the phone. It was like, "Hello, Netflix, you're picked up." And I remember reading articles about how even, let's say, not the top level, like the Ted Sarandoses or whatever, lower level executives could greenlight a series, really, and if you hear any of the creators from, let's say, the early days after I suppose, what was the first one? House of Cards, the Kevin Spacey thing. And that's when they really started getting into it. I think a lot of creators would go, "Oh yeah, Netflix. First of all, they had a ton of money. And second of all, I think the creators were given free rein, And I think the first big cancellation that I can remember was I was going to say AE, but AO or OA? OA. Remember that show? Yeah. And that was the first big cancellation that really got people worked up. And I watched that show, and to be honest with you, I don't miss it that much, but I just think it speaks to a change in the streaming business generally, where, it was driven by, cheap credit that they were getting, and it was sort of growth at any costs. And now I think they're, as you said, they're doing more curating themselves,
Yeah, I guess I'll also just mention, without going into too much detail about the big twist in the last episode, is that depending on what direction they wanted to take the series from there, it could potentially be very expensive. It potentially involve building gigantic numbers of completely new sets. So that might have also been something that Netflix.
Did you watch the making of? There was a making of.
Oh, I didn't see that.
If you're on the kind of dark page, or sorry,
right.
1899 page on Netflix,
and
if you
scroll down,
scroll down past all the episodes, then there's a making of. It's about 45-50 minutes. I started watching it, but again, I think, David, you were talking about the cost. I mean, I counted 6 or 7 different languages alone.
Yep.
So there was a shot of the director talking to 2 of the Cantonese speakers. The girl was she like a geisha girl, and her
mother.
So I think I read that they wrote everything in English, then it had to get translated, and then I can just imagine the process they had to go through even just for that thing.
Yeah, so this is a super ambitious show. So yeah, so again, we're on a transatlantic steamship in 1899, apparently, and yeah, there's all these different passengers who speak all sorts of different languages. We've got French, Danish, Japanese, Chinese.
There's no Japanese. I made a list because it was so.
There's Japanese on a record.
On a record, yes, but that's it.
That's what I was talking about, Andrea.
Okay, sorry.
But there's Polish,
Danish.
I mentioned Danish.
Spanish.
I'm sorry. There's Norwegian and Swedish too.
Yeah, there's a lot, and so actually, so that's cool, because so often in Hollywood productions, they just kind of elide the fact that people speak different languages in different parts of the world and everything, and so the plot basically, as I said, is that there's this, there's a very similar sort of steamship that went missing 4 months previously, and this ship, the Kerberos, or the main ship that we're on, gets a call from this other ship, the Prometheus, and they go to investigate it, and they find this sort of ghost, the abandoned ghost ship, and all sorts of supernatural or weird stuff is going on. There's a lot of characters. I guess one thing I'll say is that, one of my big problems with Dark is that I found it constantly confusing.
Oh God!
Who was like keeping track of who is this person? How are they related to the other people?
I had to watch it with the whole list, with a whole graphic of who was related to who within different timelines. It was so confusing.
But so one thing I liked about this show right off the bat is that I never had any trouble keeping track of the characters. They were all very clearly delineated, and so that whole aspect was much improved in my opinion.
And I think they borrowed here. I got some very serious Agatha Christie vibes in terms of how they did the setup. If you're familiar with sort of Murder on the Orient Express and all of that, those sort of the taking us from each character and spending just enough time with them to say, okay, this person has a dark secret. This person also has a dark secret. It's sort of going from one character to the next and setting it all up, but not sort of clarifying how they all come together or if they all come together. So that was a very sort of deliberate, I think, Agatha Christie technique that I thought worked well.
It seemed to me very clearly modeled on Lost, on the TV show Lost, where, you have the present story and then you're kind of getting flashbacks of each of the characters for how they ended up in this situation.
Some of that for sure. That first episode, though, to go back maybe to the issue of the spoiler, to me, that first episode dropped a lot of very heavy hints. And I wondered if they were a little bit too heavy. And you named a bunch of them in your summary just there, Dave, for me. Well, 2 of them anyway, which is the names of the ships, which already triggered a lot of reactions on my side. The choice of White Rabbit for the theme song, already, I had already guessed the first big secret straight away. And that either that was too heavy-handed or they were kind of hoping you would get it. I'm curious if others had the same reaction.
How about Ruairi? What do you think about that?
I didn't. I'll be honest with you. I don't know who's going to give away the spoiler at the end. I still feel like I shouldn't.
Yeah,
But
I'll do it. So if
Dave,
I
you do
haven't
the honors.
given
You do the honors.
it, you stay away from that.
No, I didn't really. I don't know. Maybe I'm not as clever, but I think it was a while before I was like, okay, I think I know what's going on here now, because I think a lot of my first watch was keeping track of everything. But I did notice the little kind of motifs and stuff where you had a little triangular pattern on every door and on the carpet, and there was things like the door numbers. There was like 1101, which again, the sci-fi nerd in me is thinking, well, that's some kind of binary code or something like that. And then you had a few other different things that, you know, were kind of signposting. But I don't think on the first watch, when I didn't know what was going on, I don't think I was early to the game on it.
Yeah, I kind of had the same thing where the first time I watched it, it was just, I was there for the story. On the second watch, I noticed like little things, like in the first episode, when they're in the dining room, there's this moment where everybody puts a teacup down at the same time. And there's just this
dead giveaway.
It's a
dead giveaway for me.
And then the second, and then also when they're out on the deck, I suddenly noticed that the ship never moved. Like it never bobbed up and down. The horizon never changed. It was like looking at a screen and not being out in the water.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, could be because they filmed it in front of a screen. I mean,
I know, but you would put if you're trying to make it like real, the horizon would move. Ships move, even if they're at anchor, they bob up and down. Even on a calm, it never moved. Ever. Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, like, I don't on rewatch. There seem to be lots of indications of sort of weird digital things going on. That didn't make a huge impression on me on first watch. I guess just because so many special effects are done with digital stuff, and it doesn't necessarily have a lot of import to me, I guess. But I mean, yeah. So for the first 4 episodes or so, I was just sort of reading it as some sort of, like a ghost ship kind of. I mean, obviously there's some sort of weird stuff going on, but I didn't necessarily feel confident what exactly was going on.
I'm not saying the first
White
watch
Rabbit wasn't a dead giveaway for everybody else.
No, I mean,
maybe they just like that song. I don't know.
I think it had a great soundtrack. They picked a lot of great stuff.
Great soundtrack. I think it was when they started to introduce the kind of low-tech, high-tech stuff into it, that it wasn't sort of very futuristic-y high-tech, but it was out of place for 1899, kind of steampunky kind of stuff going on there. Like there's one of the characters, I can't remember his name, he's got this like a handheld device that has buttons on it, and I think there's another, I can't remember what episode it is, but one of the crew members, he opens a panel and starts punching in a code or something. So that's when I was like, okay, well,
I think
what's going on here?
Those showed up a little bit later. Like the first episode is very ghost ship. Yeah. The second episode ends on pulling out and you see the TV screens, and then because that's what I loved about this show, is that it had a lot of really great what the fuck endings. Because I remember the first watch through, getting to the end of that second episode and seeing the screens, I literally said out loud, "What the fuck?"
Usually accompanied by gritty 60s rock and roll.
Yeah.
60s or 70s.
Yeah, but even those sort of anachronistic elements don't necessarily mean that you're in the Matrix, right? There could have been other explanations for that.
No, that's right. And listening to Rory and Andrea talking about the things they did or didn't notice in the first episodes, I mean, one of the things that I think is really fun about this show is you guys listed a bunch of stuff I didn't even notice on the rewatch. And there were a lot of things that I noticed on the rewatch that completely passed me by the first time around. The triangles and just how many places those triangles appear, in barrettes, in earrings, in like necklaces, and all sorts on the carpet, all sorts of places that are so obvious on the rewatch. You think, how on earth did I not see that the first time around?
I think the first time around I did notice her earrings because they did a lot of close shots of it, and it was
They dwelled on the carpet. How could the writer in me not notice that they were dwelling on the carpet?
Okay, so So it sounds like Andrea overall just sounds like really liked the show, and Erin, it sounds like had some some problems with it. How does Ruairi come down? How did you feel about the show overall?
No, I liked it, and I liked it the first time round. Maybe second time I was like, okay, I think I was watching it more because I knew I was going to do this first of all with you guys. So you're kind of thinking a different way about it. The first time, I tend to. Yeah, even we discussed this on Bodies, and even with Dark to a certain extent, I tend to just go with it and let a lot of stuff wash over me, because I just want to switch off when I get home. But I did enjoy it. I don't know if you're kind of picking nits. I think there was a few things that I kind of was more conscious of on the second watch. I think, for example, I think the show benefits, and I think there's a benefit and there's also a loss to not having anyone really recognizable in the cast. The only guy I recognized really was the kind of mystery figure that's revealed who was in Game of Thrones. He was the guy that was
Henry.
The father.
Henry,
the
father.
older guy.
Yes, okay, you're right.
And he was in Game of Thrones. He was an Andor, and he was in Game of Thrones, and he was in Game of Thrones. He was the guy that resurrected the mountain or whatever his name was, the Maester or whatever they were called. So I was looking through those actors, with the exception of the captain, who I knew from Dark, and I don't think if you didn't see Dark, you wouldn't know who he. Maybe he's big in Germany. I think he's quite a well-known German actor, but I don't know. Could it have benefited from a more famous face? I don't
think so.
I kind of like it when I don't recognize.
There's pros and cons. There's pros and cons.
Because you don't come with it with any preconceived notions about the actor. It's just the role.
Yeah, I mean, if let's say Maura had been played by, she's one of the main characters. If she had been played by someone like Gillian Anderson, then you'd know. Okay, right. She's not at risk because they're not going to kill off Gillian Anderson the first episode. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So
well, that's interesting, Ruairi, that you liked it. Or that you had, it sounds like you liked it better the first time than the second time. Is that what you said?
I think I did. Well, because because it was whatever it was a year and a half ago, I did forget a lot, but I enjoyed it more the first time. To be honest with you, I'm not one that really does go back and rewatch shows. It's not something I do a huge amount. But just do it for you, Dave.
Well, because I liked it more the second time. I mean, the first time through, I really loved the first 4 episodes. And then I felt like the sci-fi stuff came in too fast and too big in a way that sort of overshadowed. You had these kind of interesting characters, and I felt like before they really, just as you were starting to get to know them, the sci-fi virtual reality stuff kind of came in and sort of rendered irrelevant all of their characterization, because suddenly it just becomes all about Maura and Daniel and Elliot and solving this, like what's going on. And now you know that it's all a simulation and everything. And the second time through, once I knew that's what was going to happen, it like irked me less. But go ahead, Andrea.
Do you know it's a simulation at first? I don't know that I knew it was a simulation at the end of the second episode. I just
I'm saying
thought it was some weird, like they're being watched and it's some kind of experiment, but I didn't completely. I'm saying the fact that it was. I didn't. No, like I said, it was maybe halfway through or something that it becomes, explicit that it's a simulation. But I felt like that was too, like in Lost, there's like a couple seasons before you get to the time travel and teleporting the island and stuff like that. Yeah, but they also like famously had no idea where they were going with that.
Well, but I liked the fact that it's like a slow build before it gets too crazy with that
and
stuff.
I think these guys might have been the victims of their own ambition in that respect.
Well, I mean, I saw like a lot of viewers apparently stopped watching because they felt it was too much of a slow burn. So my advice or my sentiment there might be, counterproductive from a financial point of view. But that is how I felt about it. I would have liked to get to spend more time with the characters and more time with the 1899 setting before things got too crazy.
I think it's hard to make the comparison with Lost because it's a network broadcast show which has 22 episodes as opposed to, a Netflix show which has 8 episodes. So you only have 8 episodes to get to your real storyline. And, what would you have waited to the end of episode 3 would have made a difference to figure out that it's science fiction as opposed to.
I might have waited till the end of season 1, personally.
Well, then we would have been fucked.
Well, I mean, it depends on expectations again and the type of story that you're going for. And I think that there was lots of meat, as Dave said, in those characterizations, to have a lot of interesting plot-driven things happening on that ship that did not necessarily start loading on the sci-fi right away. Maybe just to explain my remark about White Rabbit, the reason that I knew that it was a sim early on or suspected is because for those who aren't familiar with the song White Rabbit, it's about Alice in Wonderland and the one pill that makes you larger and the one pill that makes you small. And it's, of course, a very heavy-handed Matrix reference for me. So I instantly had the Matrix in my head right from the beginning. And so all those little clues kind of got filtered through that. But another vibe I got from it that I really loved that I thought they could lead into was, I got a kind of a Sleep No More vibe from it. Did anyone go to Sleep No More when it was on in New York?
No,
I did, yeah. No.
Do you know what I mean by that? Oh, Andrea, you would have loved it.
No, see, that specifically, I did avoid it because I hate having to interact with other people and strangers, and I don't want anybody touching me.
No, you wear a mask and nobody talks to you.
You are explicitly forbidden from interacting with others.
But they interact with you, right?
Nah, generally not. Generally, it depends. Everybody experiences Sleep No More a little bit differently, and that's part of the fun. But generally,
just for listeners, let's just explain. This is an immersive.
And me,
that's what I was about to do. So what this is generally is that you show up in a hotel, a 19th century vibe kind of hotel. And you sit in the lobby and you wait to go onto an elevator, and you're given a mask, and everybody in your group of 10 people or however many people they take at a time is given a mask and told you absolutely must not speak. And you spend the rest of your time drifting from room to room according to your own schedule, interacting with the sets, and there may or may not be characters in the room acting out a scene, usually without any dialogue, that you have no context for. And so everybody experiences them differently, and they're like participating in somebody's dark, creepy 19th century memory without any context for it.
That sounds too intense. Is there alcohol?
There's definitely alcohol and probably lots of drugs. But yeah, so you kind of get that vibe in this ship when you're starting to see ghosts and you're starting to have these flashbacks that you have no context for. And I really liked that. And I thought they could have leaned into it a little bit more and had a bit more exploring those mysterious backgrounds that they had so painstakingly set up. But instead, as Dave said, I think they kind of shook the Etch-a-Sketch, and all of that just turned into particles, meaningless particles.
But so this is, it's like a mystery box show, like Lost and like Dark, where, just all these mysteries get thrown at you. And to my mind, no one has yet really landed a mystery box show where, the mysteries tend to exponentially expand, and maybe every once in a while one of them gets a solution, but in the end, you're left with this gigantic list of unanswered questions, which, I suspect there will never be any satisfactory explanation for. And
for this?
For all of them so far, including this one.
Because here's my proposal for Netflix, or at least the producers. Could you just please tell me what happened? Could you just please tell me, explain it to me? I don't care. Just write it out. I just want to know. I want to know what the fuck happens next.
But I had the sense that this was not ever going to make sense. But I'm just curious if they at least conveyed to other people the impression that it was going to make sense in the end.
Well, did they map out? I didn't do too much research into it. Did they, a lot of the time they map out, season 2, 3, 4 or whatever.
I would think they did for this, because they have to, if they're going to have a budget, they're going to have to justify the budget. And,
Yeah.
But I mean, they mapped out, I think, the story for Dark, and I didn't feel like it made sense in the end. I mean, there's a difference between mapping it out and having it actually all make sense and answer all, tie up all the loose ends.
But does it all have to make sense? I've been having this conversation with my friend lately where she doesn't like mystery. She wants everything explained to her, like as you go. And I'm just like, well, just let it go at the moment. Something eventually, maybe you'll get an explanation. And sometimes not getting an explanation is still satisfactory. Personally for me. And that's probably just me as a viewer / reader. it doesn't bother me.
I think it does come down to preference, though, Andrea, as you say.
Yeah.
And I experienced this in my viewing relationship with my husband, who has much less patience for chaos and disorder and confusion than I do. Yeah. And I think we talked about this when we did the Dark panel a little bit, about how your mileage may vary in terms of how much patience and tolerance you have for that ambiguity and that confusion. And I think what Dark did very well is, despite these entropic forces of the mystery stacking and getting more and more confusing and disorderly, they handed you enough pieces along the way that the center held. And I didn't feel that this show was successful in that regard. I think it was a very slow burn, and it was going pretty well for the first few episodes. And then each episode got exponentially weirder after that, to the point where I had lost patience by the end. And I literally, when the final cliffhanger came, first of all, I saw it coming from a mile off, so that didn't help. But also, I literally groaned aloud. I was like, enough already. And so that's why I said, like, I was officially off the bus at that point.
Well, to answer your question, Andrea, I mean, like, I feel like there's a sense in which a mystery is always more compelling than a solution, and it's like if a magician does a trick and then he's like, oh, actually, I had the coin stuck to the back of my hand or something, then it's like, okay, well, actually, the mystery was way more interesting than hearing how the trick was done. So there is that. But my personal feeling is that, like, the show at least has to convey to me the impression that they know the answer, even if that the showrunners know the answer, even if they don't reveal it to me, or if I never figure out what it is. But I have to at least have the feeling that they know what they're doing.
Did you not have that feeling for this?
Nope. No, not at all.
Interesting.
You see,
not toward the end of the season. But Ruairi, go ahead.
I don't mind the mystery box thing. I can take it to a certain extent. Like, I kind of fell out of Lost. I enjoyed, like, The Leftovers. Remember that from a couple of years ago? And Dark. But then sometimes I do run out of road with it. And I'll be honest with you, there's days where, I was quite happy to maybe skip over something that was a mystery box and just put on Reacher on Amazon and watch a big man hit people. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, and it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. No, I'm feel exactly the same way. Sometimes I want to be intellectually involved, and sometimes I just want to watch something really dumb that I can fall asleep to and I'm not missing anything. And
so in this show, right? So how it develops about midway through the season is that it seems that Maura is trapped in this simulation, and her dad is running it as some sort of, like, psychology experiment where it's the same events are looping around over and over again, and he wants to see. It seems like, and they're all like rats in a maze, and he's trying to see if he can get them to forsake their emotions, and that's the only way that they're going to survive, and they keep failing, and he's watching them on his TV screens all the time, and that all makes sense to me. I was okay with that. But then as it goes on, it's like, no, actually, like, Daniel's her husband and Elliot's her son, and she actually was the one who created the simulation because she wanted to keep Elliot alive. Like, all that stuff just felt wrong to me. Like, I can't prove that it doesn't make sense, but just once it started happening, I was like, this just doesn't feel like it's gonna make sense in the end. It feels like they're just sort of throwing out twists willy-nilly.
For the sake of doing bigger and doing more. That's how it felt to me. It wasn't necessary. There was enough there. So they call the ship the Kerberos. So immediately you get this sense of, like, this is the three-headed dog that keeps dead people in Hades. that they're trapped, that they're in hell, and that this ship is their prison. And you have this figure who I could have heard a lot less from him the last couple of episodes. The last episode in particular is just one long monologue and he's dressed like one of those Star Wars villains. He's like Moff Ponderous, standing there, just exuding wisdom about everything that's going on. But, I
sorry, are you talking about Daniel or Henry here?
Henry.
Okay.
He explains a whole bunch. He spent a great deal of the last episode in just pure exposition about what's going on. And so, as a means of unraveling this incredibly complicated mystery you've just spent the last 7 episodes stacking, that for me was deeply unsatisfying. The characters have no agency. They're just told what's going on. And even when they're told, they still don't get it.
We discover with Henry that the older guy, who we think is the kind of mastermind, that he's kind of stuck in there too. He's stuck in this simulation as well. And that's,
which would have been a great reveal in season 2.
Yeah, well, that's kind of his motivation. But again, going back to some of the characters, I mean, this kind of mysterious boy turns up with a magic beetle. And it sounds ridiculous now that I say it out loud. But and then the other guy who I kind of unfairly nicknamed Low Rent Frodo.
He does kind of have that look.
I started thinking, maybe it's because I've too much dark in my system. It was a younger version of the same person. I was like, you know what I mean? That's where I went first of all. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Everyone is kind of, you know, we do discover at the end that everyone is stuck in there, and the guy Henry, who you think is pulling the strings, is stuck in this simulation as well, and they all want out.
Yeah, and my problem, it's not a problem for me that there's that twist or whatever. It's that when I go back and think of the earlier conversations, they don't seem to make sense with that twist. So there's a part where a henchman comes in and says, like, here's my report on Operation Kerberos, you know, and then it's like, wait, if what's actually going on is that Henry just wants to get the key so he can get out of the simulation because he's trapped there, is Operation Kerberos his name for just getting the key? It seems like a weirdly like bureaucratic thing for just, I want to get out of this simulation. And, you know, like, as opposed to running experiments on people, that makes a lot more sense for that to be called Operation Kerberos.
Well, and perhaps even more significantly, if Henry is also trapped in the sim, why is he trying to thwart them from breaking out of the sim? Is a question that they did not answer, at least that I caught.
No, it's all super weird because she wants out of the sim, he wants out of the sim, and she also got a key from her brother, Kieran, which helps her get out of the sim. So it's like, it seems like everybody wants them out of the sim. So why is there not why are they not working together? I don't get it. And
one of my questions was about the simulation itself. So if we go to the end, David, do you want to do it? Just do it, please.
Yeah. Okay. So in the last,
I don't feel like
put
your
us out of our
podcast. I feel like you should do it.
So in the last shot, it turns out that Maura wakes up from this Matrix kind of thing, and she's in this chamber on a spaceship in outer space, which is called the Prometheus, which is the same name as one of the ships in the 1899 simulation. And in this chamber are a bunch of the cast members who we recognize, and they're all still plugged into the simulation. And she gets a message on a screen from her brother, who we still have not seen, don't really know that much about, Kieran. And he says, like, hello, sister, welcome to the real world, something like that.
And I think that's an AI and not actually her brother, but that's a whole
and there's a message about 1,700 survivors or something. And
and there's the same number, according to the computer screen, there's basically the same number of people on the spaceship as there are in the ship in the simulation. And also it sort of zooms into her, the very last shot is it sort of the camera zooms into her eyeball and we see a kind of pyramid thing in her pupil, which we interpret by this point as evidence that she's still inside that this real world is some sort of simulation too.
Yeah, nesting dolls of Sims.
So my question was, well, you know, is this a simulation that's gone wrong? Is it, you know, obviously they're in deep space, they're in hibernation or whatever, they're on some kind of generation ship, or, you know, the world has ended and there's a surviving race or whatever it is. So is this simulation is this something to keep their mind active while they're away, and then it has been corrupted by this Kieran person? You know, what is the original, you know, was the simulation, I know she said she created a simulation of her son's old bedroom, you know, obviously her son was sick and died or whatever. That's the little boy that shows up, Moore's little boy. And then, so did she create the simulation? Did it grow out of there? Is, you know, could you, and then I start thinking, well, you know, can you pick, you know, that you're lying on a beach for 4, you know, what is the, you know, are there different, you know, did Kieran take over and then do this ship thing? I had a lot of questions about that.
So many questions, starting with, if you're going to do a sim of your kid and you're in the year 2099, why is he wearing a 19th century jumper? Because I don't get it. It's weird. There were a lot of things about I'm being facetious there, but there are a lot of things about their memories that don't make sense to me. And I guess one of the biggest objections that I had, going back to what Dave was saying earlier about the characters, is that you spend the first several episodes getting to know these characters and learning that they're all kind of strong in their own way, and they have agency and they have backstories and they have lives. And they spend the last several episodes lurching around like a bunch of ball bearings in a maze and have no agency at all and just keep asking what's going on over and over in various languages. And it's just very frustrating that they're all reduced to these cardboard cutouts at the end. And then in this last scene, you see them all plugged into the sim and you're thinking, where do these guys go from here, narratively speaking? What is their role at this point? And how do they all have these memories that that seem to have taken place in the 19th century? Are these metaphors for that last question I could live with because it has the potential to be interesting. Were those memories metaphors for something else that actually did happen in their lives in the future? But yeah, it's just taking all the air out of the tires as far as the characters are concerned.
Well, this was an issue I had, if you'll remember, with Dark as well, is that you had this huge cast of characters who were really interesting and had all this stuff going on, and then in the end, really only Jonas and Marta mattered to the overall, sort of overarching, plot. And so I felt like, it's something. It just seems to me that these showrunners kind of struggle with is finding a way for all the characters to be involved in an interesting, meaningful way, toward as the story goes along, rather than just focusing on, the central ones. But I don't know, Andrea, are we just totally trashing this show that you loved so much?
No, I think those are excellent points. I just felt like I trusted them to answer the questions in season 2, or at least the more interesting, because I was questioning why are these other people here and how do they fit into this narrative? Because they all have their own individual narratives. But I felt that was something that was going to be picked up or at least resolved or explained in the next season. But I'm getting the feeling nobody else thought that.
I think part of it is that I think to do the mystery box thing well, you have to answer some of the questions before you move on to bigger, more complicated questions. And they don't really do that. They add, but they never subtract. And and maybe we can circle back to it, but the whole feminist narrative and its failure to launch in this show was fascinating to me and confusing why it was even there. And so maybe we can come back to that because David sounded like you had something you wanted to add.
Well, yeah. So what happened to me with Dark is that at the end of season 1, I was like, there's no way they can possibly wrap this up. There's no way this all makes sense. And then at the end of season 2, I was like, okay, they did a surprisingly good job, like way better than I was expecting of making this all make sense. So I'm hopeful that season 3, actually everything will make sense. And then season 3, I'm like, I still have like 100 things. I have like a list of 100 things that they never answered and were kind of important. Mm-hmm. So if this were to have then, and I don't know if we said this was plotted out as a 3-season thing, they said. So if it had followed the same pattern, I'm sure a lot of things would have been answered in a satisfactory way, but I'm still left with the overwhelming impression that at the end of season 3, there would have been a list of 100 things that like nobody can answer, like these questions. And I would have been perfectly happy. I mean, I really enjoyed watching this. I would have loved to see where it went. Like you're saying, Andrea, it doesn't like, it's not that like every, mystery box show has to answer everything. I just would be really, really impressed if someone were to actually pull that off. And I didn't get the feeling that this show was going to be the one to actually pull that off. But I would have loved to see an imperfect show, just fine,
On the strength of how they continued with Dark, I would have given the benefit of the doubt for a second season. I really, and it's a pity because I really, really enjoyed the first 3 or 4 episodes. But I disliked the last couple of episodes, and in particular the last episode enough that it affected my sort of overall enjoyment of the show. But I've never been a person to bail on a show because of 1 or 2 episodes that I didn't like. So I definitely personally would have given them the benefit of the doubt. But can we talk about the title for a second? I would have gone for 2. Yeah, you would have.
I would have gone for 2 if they had if let's say season 2 was to come out this October or whatever. I would be in on it again, but with the kind of caveats, all right, okay, you've got me for another 8 hours, but it better be good.
Yeah. But I was very curious about, so they called this show 1899. And I don't remember if it's the penultimate episode or maybe the episode 6 or so, they make a point more than once of Maura deliberately looking at a novel called 1899. Did we notice that?
I noticed the one that said Wake Up or something like that.
The Awakening by Kate Chopin.
Yeah.
I didn't notice there's a book.
Yes, it's The Awakening, which was written, in 1899. And so I looked it up. I wasn't familiar with the book. I don't know if anybody else looked it up.
I had to read it in high school.
Oh, did you? Huh.
Yeah.
I would be interested to hear what your take on it was. But essentially, it's a story, if I understand correctly, Dave, about a sort of a feminist awakening of a woman discovering her agency outside of being a wife and a mother, and it was met with controversy at the time. And so the fact that they go out of their way to sort of show you this book is interesting. And there's a number of dialogue points throughout the story that make a point of drawing your attention to a female character having agency and being strong. And, in that very first conversation between Maura and, I never remember her name, but the madam.
Mrs. Wilson.
Yeah. Mrs. Wilson, thank you. Where Mrs. Wilson is expressing admiration for Maura, that she's actually a doctor. And Maura says something to the effect of, well, women are allowed to study medicine in England, but not to practice. And Mrs. Wilson says, that's what they do, don't you? They show you the world and they tell you can't have it.
Yeah.
And she comes back to this theme repeatedly, and they all do. But where does that all go? And how does that theme make sense in the context of where we find out they are? How does that women breaking outside of the 19th century Moors correspond to this life in 2099? And a similar question with regard to the relationship between Angel and Ramiro. Or for that matter, the backstory of Tove and her family, which also centers around, it starts off as a problem in relation to the fact that there's this scandalous gay relationship going on between, what's his name again?
Crester.
Yes, thank you, Crester, and Unseen Farm Boy. How do those narratives make sense in the future that we are actually in? And so they just went to such trouble to set that feminist narrative up that it left me scratching my head.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the cynical side of me just says that it was just sort of some of the furniture that comes along with the 19th century setting, and that they were never super invested in going too deep into it. But, again, it's hard, I want to underline that, I'm fully aware that this was supposed to be a 3-season thing. And so, in a sense, it's not fair to judge it as an unfinished story. But, I'm not sure. I mean, the thing that makes me think of is that there's there's this really sort of sexist doctor who we meet in the first episode or two, and he says something about, this is why I'm not in favor of women practicing medicine, is because they can't put their emotions aside and think rationally or something. And that's almost exactly the same thing that that Henry says about the people in the experiments, that he's trying to get them to not be emotional. So I thought there was something interesting was going to happen with that, and maybe there would have eventually, but I felt like the thing about, I thought that plot point of, Henry trying to force people not to be emotional was interesting, but then it sort of got completely sidelined once the thing about Maura being the one who created the simulation came in, which wasn't as interesting to me. I mean, I felt like that was a little more, I don't know, a little more familiar or predictable.
Who was your who was everyone's favorite backstory of the characters? I'm trying to think. I think I liked the French couple that are traveling. I think it's suggested he has epilepsy or something, because he keeps having seizures.
He has a brain tumor.
Yeah. A brain tumor. Yeah. He keeps having seizures. He's taking medicine, which then, impacts their, lovemaking, and that's an issue for them. And there's a very kind of cold relationship with him and his wife. And then we see a flashback to his story of in the trenches in a war somewhere in, looks like North Africa. with another guy who then shows up. I like that particular story. That was the one. I'm just curious what other people thought.
I don't know if I had a favorite backstory. There were some that I could have done without. Anyways, we don't need to go there, but just, if you are trying show writers to do a feminist narrative, I would suggest you leave out the obligatory rape just once for fun. Anyway, just to see if you can.
I would have liked to seen Angel and Ramirez's backstory. We never got that.
Oleg's backstory also is
Oleg,
hinted at, but one thing I think they did very, very well is in a world where we're getting a lot of shows that are populated entirely by assholes doing asshole things, they have a good sort of gamut of characters who they've got one or two characters who are fairly unambiguously good, and a couple of characters who are in a much more antagonistic role and who are just kind of giant dicks. And then most people sort of fall somewhere in between. And so they did, I think, a good job of having a broad spectrum of complicated people without it just being an endless parade of assholes.
Well, we had the mother, the Crester, and what's her name? Tova?
Yeah,
Tova was the sister.
Eben was
the mother who thinks this is sort of when things start going south, she decides this is God's vengeance, and she already has an issue with Crester because she knows he's gay, and so I think she says, "I wish it was you that died instead of the other young boy who died."
Ada, the daughter,
the little girl. Excuse me, sorry, yeah. And then we had a kind of the other major asshole, I suppose, was the big guy with the beard, the crewman.
Yeah.
Who
Franz.
Yeah, thanks for the names. But he, first of all, I was like, would he not just like wipe his face? He was bleeding nonstop.
I had the same thought. I was like, for fuck's sake.
So actually,
just wipe it off.
In interviews, they said that because of like all the steam down in the boiler room, that wounds don't heal.
Oh, okay,
and that's why his wounds never healed.
But he this
is just kind of funny because they said that that Clemence and Lucien, they're actually Belgian, not French. So I don't think there's any way you would know that if you didn't read an interview. but
no.
So.
Some people would hear it in their accents, but I didn't, for the record.
It might have been a war thing. The Belgians fighting a war.
I got the impression they were in the French Foreign Legion, but I don't know if they ever actually said.
I don't know where those trenches were supposed to be. It was a big question for me.
I think it was, I sort of did a bit of I think French, when I realized they were French Foreign Legion, I think the French were sort of heavily involved in Algeria around the turn of the century.
They were heavily involved all over Africa, but I just don't know that they ever resulted in trenches.
Yeah.
But wasn't the French Foreign Legion like actually just a bunch of criminals who took up, like there weren't any war heroes?
I think the thing with without going off on too much of time, I think the thing with the French Foreign Legion is it's you fight for France, but you can come from anywhere. And I think the old story was you could be a criminal on the run, join the Foreign Legion, and that's it. You're a new person. Then,
There's a really good movie, and I don't know if anyone's seen it, called Beaujest, that this reminded me of a lot. This one storyline. So I suspect that it was inspired by that. But Rory, go ahead. You were going to say something before I jumped in.
Just it was about in relation to the big guy with the beard and the cut face. He was our kind of bit of a protagonist, and he was the number one. He was one of the big bads, I suppose. Yeah. But then he does have his redemption where he kind of sacrifices himself and closes off the hatch.
Well, and he's a big softy about the little girl getting killed too. Yeah. He's more upset than anybody who isn't directly related to her. Yeah. So that was interesting for sure.
And as a person, I have a kind of a fear of wide open spaces of water. I did enjoy the storm footage. I thought that was quite good. I enjoyed that part of it as well.
But you live on an island.
I know. And I'm one of those people that, for some reason YouTube thinks I want to watch sort of massive waves and ships.
It's a particularly hostile bit of sea.
So I live on an island, and I'm only about 5 minutes from the coast. But I enjoyed, I know that we talked a little bit about the kind of special effects, and they use this thing called the volume, which is similar to, I think, The Mandalorian. which is basically a giant LED screen or wraparound screen. It's enormous. If you watch the making of, you'll see it. Again, I think that, I mean, they were pumping real water. They had a rain machine overhead.
That looked
so
miserable.
I think nearly everything was done. In this volume.
Well, let me say, there was, like, to give the show credit, there were some amazing set pieces in this. So, like, when all the passengers are jumping off the railings,
very good.
when the ship is sailing through the kind of whirlpool to its new destination, and when it ends up in sort of the graveyard of ghost ships, like, there was some just unforgettable, amazing visuals in this season.
So were those ghost ships, that was like all the resets from previous simulations?
That was,
because I
which
thought
is a lot more than dozens.
Because that confused me, because I thought he said we've done this, dozens of times or whatever. I thought he said a number of times that they've had to reset. But when you see that shot of all these ships, there's hundreds.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, I assume everybody has a long list of things that they're confused about. So I'm just curious if there's anything... like, if we could go through maybe the top couple, if we can possibly explain or speculate about any of them.
Okay. Sure. I have things I'm curious about.
I'll just throw out a couple of my favorite theories and stuff or that I saw. So, like, one thing is why is Henry outside this big pyramid and this giant black pyramid? And the best explanation I saw of that is that the pyramid is like the simulation, the simulation with the ships and everything is going on inside the pyramid. And he's found a way, he's still inside the computer, but he's found a way to get outside of the space where the simulations and the loops and everything are running. So he sort of constructed his little virtual office in a sort of like deleted, and that's why there's all the like virus black rock stuff around, is because this is like a previously deleted section of the hard drive or something, and he's kind of found his way into it and made his home there. That was the best explanation I saw for that.
Then who is his henchman?
I do not know. I guess, are the henchmen, are they also people who are they're potentially just digital AI things, or maybe they're also plugged into the simulation. I don't know.
Dave, did you see any list in your research that there's this scene at the very end where she's meticulously looking at each and every life pod, and because they all look so different, I couldn't identify all of them. Did you get like the full list of who is and isn't in the pods?
Oh,
I have
good,
it
because I had the
down.
same problem. I was like, I couldn't recognize.
So here's the list of who's there at the end. Angel, Ramiro, Captain Ike, Tova, Crester, Eben, Anker, Ling Yi, Yukji, Clements, Lucian, and Jerome, and then there's one empty pod in addition to the one that Mora came out of.
Which is presumably Daniel?
Or Kieran.
Well,
or
we don't... I mean,
father.
there is a lot of speculation that Daniel and Elliot are just AIs. And they
Elliot
don't exist
definitely is, I think,
outside the simulation.
And I think Kieran is too, while we're on the subject.
Because they both have sort of a weird, like, goth kind of black and white sort of visual aesthetic to them that none of the other characters have. And
the kid looks like Eddie Munster.
Well, it's the outfit, I think. The knickers.
And the hair.
And Daniel, when Mora's about to wake up, she says, "Will I see you when I wake up?" Or like, "Will you?" I forget. And he says like, "Yeah, I'll be with you always," or something like really that doesn't make it sound like he's actually going to be there when she wakes up. So that leads people to think he only exists within the simulation.
So my question was: are these, let's call it, for the sake of it, they are the main characters of the show? Are these like the main crew? Are we talking the captain, the first officers kind of situation? And then I was wondering as well, on the second watch, when you see that ship, which is a massive ship, is, are there other pods with groups of 8 to 10 people in there? And they're, what's going on with them? Or,
It looked to be, because there was, you pull out and there's the same pods all around.
So is there little groups doing their own thing in another simulation? Is there someone, is it like Westworld where someone else is in, ancient Japan? Do you know what I mean? Like,
thank you for bringing up Westworld, Rory. That was another one that I actually thought was quite similar, and I had a similar reaction. I was totally on board until I definitely wasn't.
Yeah,
I jumped out of Westworld. I jumped out.
Yeah. Mine was the like season 3 when they came to the present day, I guess.
Exactly. When they left the sim, it was no fun anymore. Never leave the sim.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that gets back to what I was alluding to earlier is like, so what do we think season 2 would have been? Would it have been all in 2099, or would it have been like part in 2099 and then she like goes back into 1899? Because like physically the 2099 Prometheus ship doesn't seem like there's that much room for exciting stuff to be going on. It's basically just a ring of pods. So I don't know. It didn't seem like there was a lot to explore. I mean, maybe another ship could have shown up or something, and this is what I was getting at is like, what is the budget's going to be for season 2 if they're going to have to like build all these sci-fi ship sets in addition to the 1899 sets they've already built? Or
I assumed they were going to do it Matrix style, where, you know, a lot of it still goes back into the sim.
Mm-hmm.
Or a different sim.
Or a different sim. The sim meaning like it's a simulation, but it can change shapes and sizes. So, you know, maybe they all go back into a different... And you know, knowing these guys and maybe some of the answers to my questions about the apparent anachronisms in the backstories, maybe these people weren't born in 2099. Maybe there's a time travel element here too, where they get sort of cherry picked from different places. I don't know. With these show writers, anything is possible.
Well, one theory I saw that I really liked, I don't think there's almost any textual support in the show for this, but the idea was that humans destroyed the original Earth because we're too, angry and selfish and all this stuff. And these sims, like Henry's experiments in these sims, were a way to get people to like let go of their emotions and be rational. And that you only get woken up from the simulation once you've gone through that process and are ready to be a colonist on the, on the colony world. And like I said, I don't think there's much other than Henry's thing that supports that, but I thought that was a cool idea because, like he says too, there's a line where he says that they chose, like everyone chose to do this. Wait, I don't know if I could find the exact quote. Henry says like they're all in here because they all chose to be this here to escape their past, and now they're trapped in here forever. So like whatever the situation is, apparently everyone on the crew of the spaceship, assuming this is real at all, volunteered for it.
Again, with the kind of theories thing, I had Googled a few, 1899 theories that someone pointed out that Ike is an anagram for key. So take from that what you want. And he's kind of, I think that's one that's, I think you're going too far down the rabbit hole there.
If you want to go too far down the rabbit hole,
you could spend all day on this. Yeah.
Well, there's this 100-page document called Cyber Mythology, and it attempts to explain everything in the show by reference to obscure programming jargon and things like that. It seems like conspiracy stuff to me, but if anyone's curious about that, because some of the like Kerberos and Prometheus are apparently well-known network security type things.
Are they? Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, I didn't know that either. But so I would. Do they have any linkages to their Greek analogs? Another one that they talked about was another theme that came up in a number of places was this idea of being a seeker and discovering, and that goes nicely with Prometheus, right? And that Prometheus brought the people fire, brought the people technology. Is she Prometheus? Has she brought them some new kind of technology? It seemed to me that those word choices were very deliberate, but I don't know what those programming implications are, what those connotations mean.
Well, Prometheus is also the guy who gets punished for that by having to roll the rock up the hill. That's Prometheus?
No, that's Sisyphus.
Okay,
Sisyphus, yeah.
Prometheus has his liver eaten by vultures over and over again.
Right. Well, it is sort of the same thing where there's the same loop going on where he gets his liver eaten and then he grows it back, and every day the eagle comes and eats it again.
Yeah.
So that is the same being caught in a loop of hell.
So is this one a reference? The triangle. The triangle is an interesting one because it's not the pyramid exactly. It's a triangle with a line through it. And to me, that is the alchemical symbol for earth.
Mm.
Is that deliberate? What does that mean?
I don't know. I don't know.
These could also
there's
just be...
another one. There's
Just
another
a
one,
triangle?
Kieran, the brother. Well, first of all, I would pronounce that name. There's an Irish pronunciation, which would be Kieran. You kind of elongate the A at the end. And another theory that I saw is that Kieran is Elliot, because Kieran, if you translate it, or Kieran, is little dark-haired one. So, which is what the little boy looks like, But again,
so on that,
I let
Ruairi,
a lot of this. I let a lot of this wash over me.
You probably noticed this. They make a point of having Daniel tell Maura that her name is Irish, but she's not Irish.
Yeah.
What is
I
the
missed
point
that.
of this piece of dialogue? And of course, Kieran is an Irish name. And I wondered, if that might have been an acronym. I'm still convinced that even if there was a brother at some point, she's named the AI operating system of the ship after her brother, and that's who she's talking to.
Yeah,
well, if I see a red-haired woman who's called Maura, I'm thinking, well, she's from Galway or Mayo or something.
Yeah.
She is, and around that time, 1899, turn of the century, that is when in Ireland we would have seen thousands and thousands of people leaving the country. Yeah. We had a huge emigration here. In the wake of, there was a huge famine here, it wiped out millions of people. And that's a huge part of our own history. All the people that went and set up in America, that's a huge part of our own history here.
So where does that fit into it? It was one of those things where, because I do think that these showrunners are deliberate enough that there's not a lot of throwaway dialogue that serves no purpose, particularly because it's literally occurs in the first encounter between Daniel and Maura. So why does he say this? I'm very curious.
No, I have no idea. So many questions, like, why would you use, what looks like one of those old puzzles to interface with your computer, the moving, the shapes, why would you use that? Why is
especially if you have an iPad hiding in a drawer somewhere?
Yeah, exactly. So you have this kind of low-tech kind of interface, and then, as you said, he pulls out what is effectively an iPad, and he's pinching to zoom as looking on a map. In another
that's
another
one of the
character.
Places where I just lost my mind.
Yeah,
like,
I did like it did remind me of Dark again. The kind of the machine, the kind of brass and
all the satisfying noises and clicks it makes,
and climbing through dark holes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, the other thing I guess I really want an answer to is that Mrs. Wilson has this incredibly green dress that looks nothing like any other costume in the show. And it's like the same color as the magic scarab beetles that open doors. And
Ireland
I did
is
not
the Emerald Isle. No, just kidding.
I did not confirm this, but somebody online says that she has bugs embroidered on the dress.
Okay.
So, assuming that's accurate, it seems like there must be something else going on there, but I can't.
Or it's just a green dress.
I don't know. It seemed pretty.
Sorry, Dave. Did you mention Mrs. Wilson as among the people in the pods, and Oleg? No. As far as let me look at the list again. I don't think either of them were. I mean, Oleg is clearly a main character. He's one of the first people we spend time with and one of the last people we spend time with.
Yeah, he also has memories. I mean, we don't see much of them, but they do. We know that they exist. Like a memory room we know exists. I did see, so the actress who plays Mrs. Wilson, she did say, I saw an interview where she said that her character, she's sad that they didn't, renew the show because there was going to be a lot more about her character in season 2. So, I don't know what would happen there. So, I don't know, any other mysteries that anybody wants to throw out for discussion?
I don't think there's any more point. You could keep throwing it, but we're not going to get any answers. That's what we've learned from the last hour, whatever it's been. We're not going to get any, and because it's been cancelled, we're definitely not getting any answers.
And it's just going to be us creating our own rabbit hole, and it's like, oh boy, maybe not.
I did read something about continuing it as a graphic novel. Did you come across anything like that, Dave?
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
I didn't see that, but I spent so much time on that list of quotes I sent you guys. I didn't have I didn't have as much time to do other research.
What did you want to talk about with those specific quotes? Why those specific quotes?
Well, so for listeners, yeah, I basically went through the whole season and transcribed all the quotes that have to do with like the virtual reality world and why it exists and what Henry's agenda is and what Daniel's trying to accomplish and what Elliot's trying to accomplish. And okay, so some interesting things is that, okay, so like one of the things that I was sure was never going to have any explanation was why Elliot doesn't talk for like 3 episodes and then just starts talking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was like, he's just not talking because it's weird and creepy, and now he's talking because they need it for exposition, and there's never going to be any good reason for that. But he does say at one point, you know, they're listening. This is his initial explanation for why he can't talk to Maura, is he says they're listening, and then after he takes her into her memory room, I think, and then Daniel says, you shouldn't have done that. Now it knows you're here, or something like that. So I am guessing that that's some sort of antivirus AI or something that they're trying to avoid attracting the attention of.
It is Kieran. It's just me, though.
So is that, if you're talking about antivirus type stuff, that's what I kind of thought when the walls started kind of coming apart. Initially I thought it was like nanotechnology or something, or maybe I was overthinking it, but maybe, and then it actually starts to chase them, you know.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, is that what that is as well?
That's what I thought it was. That the black crystals are a virus that's invading everything. That's the conclusion I came to.
I think they say so.
Or is it some antivirus to get rid of them?
I think they say that it's a virus. And I think the implication when Daniel doesn't want them to touch it is that if their code becomes corrupted, then maybe there's, you know, it does something to their consciousness. Yeah. My interpretation of the it on the second rewatch was that it refers to the entity that is controlling the sim, which is Kieran, which wants them all to stay in there for some reason.
Is Kieran a real person, or is he? Because according to Henry, he seems to be a real person. But I mean, he was a real person at some point, I think. Yeah, I think he might be dead.
That's my assumption. Yeah. I think that
was
she's
there
named
an empty
Kieran
chamber in that,
after,
or uploaded his conscious to
exactly
whatever.
We've already seen that she does this whole sort of trap in a jar thing with her own kid.
Yeah.
So maybe she's done a similar kind of trap in the jar, or at least an homage by naming this operating system Kieran. And I would be, I definitely think there's lots of perspectives for acronyms in that particular word.
But so if Kieran wants her to stay in the sim, why does she get a letter at the very beginning from Kieran with the key that is what, like, if she had never gotten that
it's
key,
the cheese.
like she.
That's what I think.
What do you mean?
To make the rats run through the maze. It's the cheese. They think they're trying to, well, Maura anyways thinks she's trying to solve the mystery of what happened to Kieran, and Ike thinks he's trying to solve the mystery of what happened to the Prometheus. And they all, who knows what the cheese was in the other letters. But I think the idea is that if you're the puppeteer here, to totally mix a metaphor, that you need to give them some impetus, some reason to not just sit on their bed and go, why am I here? What's going on? But you need to give them something to chase. That was my assumption anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Nope, more rabbit holes to go down.
It's also weird that, so the letter that Maura gets is addressed to Henry, which is her father's name, and she explains that, very improbably in my opinion, that her middle name is Henriette, and that Kieran called her Henry, and that's why it's addressed. Like, that seems so weird to me that it's just hard for me to accept that at face value, that's why the envelope is addressed to Henry. I don't know.
Maybe it was addressed to Henry, and he was originally in the sim, and she wasn't supposed to be in the sim. And she somehow hijacked the sim.
But she created the sim.
She might have created it without the intention of being in it.
But the reason we're told that she created it was to be with Elliot.
Son.
That's the reason she created a sim. That's the reason she created the little creepy room with no windows, the bunker playroom.
Yeah.
But why the ship sim was created is another question.
Yeah.
It's a question that will never be answered.
But also bringing up that when when Elliot finally talks, he says they're listening, and Daniel says they're going to find you. Wouldn't they already know where he is because there's screens everywhere?
This is my thing, Andrea. When he pulls out the iPad and it magically finds the pyramid, I'm like, either you're an idiot and you just didn't think of that until now, or it was a little bit Deus Ex Machina for me.
Yeah,
or if he doesn't exist, he doesn't have a physical. All right, just go crazy thinking all these.
Well,
things
this is another thing, is that it's very hard to believe that these characters have been through this dozens of times before. They just don't seem like they're like, you'd think it would be like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, where he knows exactly when to catch the kid falling out of the tree and all that kind of stuff.
But they don't remember what this happened before.
No, but Daniel and Henry.
Yeah, Daniel and Henry.
Exactly what's happened, and Elliot, I guess.
But they also say they keep saying we've never gotten this far before. So there's variables. Obviously, there's variables depending on what choices people make. So that's why he doesn't know what's going to happen, because it changes every time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I guess, but he's able to reprogram the entire thing so that they don't need the key at all. And it's like he never thought to try that before. Yeah. And there's something else I was just going to mention. But I don't know if anyone listening is like screaming at their iPhone right now what the solutions to some of this stuff is. Definitely feel free to email or hit us up on Twitter or whatever, and let us know your theories
and flame us as a bunch of idiots. It wouldn't be the first time. God,
you people don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. It's actually about
you really need to chill.
Yeah. I've gotten a few of those messages too.
All right. Well, why don't we we're out of time, so why don't we start wrapping this up? But hopefully, I don't know, maybe someday there will be a graphic novel. Or
I really hope there is, because I just want to fucking know.
Some PA will leak the script for season 2 or something, or the treatment for season 2 or something. But so let's get into some final thoughts. So Ruairi, final thoughts on 1899.
A lot to take in, a lot going on, but a lot to enjoy. Especially, I would say, let it kind of flow over you if you want to for the first time, which is what I tend to do. And then if you want to do what I did, go back maybe a year later when you've forgotten a lot of it. And then it'll give you the opportunity to take another look. And I think you might get more out of it that way. Overall, I did really like it. I know we've kind of picked it apart over the last hour or whatever, but I did like it. Some of it looks fantastic. There's some, if you're a Dark fan, you'll be happy to see the captain again, Jonas again. So just go with it. That's the only thing I can say about these things. These mystery box things, just go with it. You'll either bang your head off the wall for the rest of the night thinking about it, or you'll be like, okay, I'm firing up Jack Reacher.
Andrea, final thoughts.
I agree with all of that. But I for me, I like not having all the questions answered. I am very much a let it wash over me. And if my first impression when I'm doing that is it's great, and I enjoy having things not explained to me, then this is going to be the kind of thing that you're going to like. But if you're one of those people who needs to have everything explained to you, I think it's going to drive you crazy. And if that's what happened to the people who weren't watching or who stopped watching, then that was probably the problem. But I am one of those people who likes a mystery and an ongoing mystery and questions upon questions upon questions. So that's why this worked for me so well. Mm. And also, speaking to Erin's point about women liberation, two things. One was watching Clemens put on the pants, and her they put us in skirts and high heels so that we can't run away, I think was such a great line. And also, every woman in their dress has pockets, and that is the height of women's liberation, frankly. I just need to get that out. There you go.
Everything should have pockets.
Damn right.
And I'll just say again, I mean, that I thought that the set pieces, I think this is totally worth watching. There's a bunch of, as I said, a bunch of amazing set pieces. I mean, there's a lot that I really like in this show. I loved, the first half of the season. Like I said, I mean, I wasn't as crazy about the second half, but it's definitely worth watching, in my opinion. And I love this mystery box genre. It's possibly my favorite genre. And I will be very impressed someday if somebody, makes one where, it's clear that they had carefully figured out everything beforehand and weren't just kind of making it up as they went along.
I think if anyone's going to pull it off, it could well be these guys.
Yeah.
And maybe that's like a good segue. For me, we've picked it apart. That's our job a little bit on this show. But this was an enjoyable show. It was flawed in my opinion, but it was enjoyable. And I think even if I preferred Dark to this, I continue to be impressed by the attention to detail and by the ambition, just the pure ambition of what these guys are putting out. And I think they could very well nail it one day. And I will continue to, I would recommend this show as enjoyable if flawed. And I will watch the next thing they put out and the next thing after that, because I have a feeling one of these days they're going to hit it out of the park.
Yeah. And like I said, they have another Netflix thing in the pipeline. So definitely looking forward to that. I think this is a little bit, I don't know, it may be that stuff like, it may be that stuff like Dark was just sort of, of its time when Netflix was flush with money and they would give 3 seasons to something,
I have a question.
Sort of with a million characters in German and yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
Was Dark and this funded by Netflix, or was it a German production that they acquired? I'm guessing from what everybody said that it was funded by Netflix, but
I think it was majority funded by Netflix, and so I think there's like a national, fund for this kind of thing. But most of the money, from what I read, came from Netflix.
Okay.
Yeah, for this, for sure, most of the money came from Netflix. I forget for Dark. I'm not sure if I know where the funding came from.
Because that seems, not that Netflix doesn't do, that's the great thing about Netflix, personally, is that they do international productions specifically for those countries. And if you like that, you can watch, I've watched a bunch of Turkish television shows there. But I was just wondering if this was one of those, they specifically did it for a German audience and then America picked up on it and started watching it. But
no, this was definitely a joint venture with Netflix from the beginning. And yeah, so I hope that's not the case, but it might be the case that, that we're just past the period of time where, less conventional stuff like this could get financed, because it was just sort of a weird confluence of factors that made something like Dark possible, and made something like this, season 1 of this get greenlit in the first place. It's not something that you see a lot of. But 10 things on a more cheerful note. Definitely looking forward to what these showrunners do next, and yeah, definitely I'll be watching it. All right, but let's wrap things up there. So again, we've been speaking with Erin Lindsey, Andrea Kail, and Ruairi Carroll. So thanks everyone so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
And that was our panel. So big thanks again to Erin Lindsey, Andrea Kail, and Ruairi Carroll for joining us on the show. This episode of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy was made possible thanks to support from listeners like you. So if you enjoyed the show and want it to continue, please support us on Patreon over at patreon.com/geeks or via PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. All right, so that was our show. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of Wired.com. For more information about the show, visit geeksguideshow.com. To learn more about your host, visit davidbarrkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by yours truly, Jack Kincaid. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.